of you might not know this, but I actually used to compete a lot over the board before I started streaming. In this video, I'm going to be taking you on a trip down memory lane, and I'm going to be showing you one of my best chess tournament games where I beat an international master rated 2498 in a tournament in Spain when I was only 16 years old. This is the greatest result I've ever had in a chess tournament. I have never beaten someone this strong, and that is why I want to show you my thoughts, how it happened, show you some pictures and everything in between. So I hope you guys enjoy the video, and let's get right into it. So at this point, I was 16 years old. This was in the year 2018, and this tournament was in Benasque, which is a small town in Spain. It was an open chess tournament, and there were lots and lots of people participating. Now, this is round number 2 of the tournament. I had a rating of 2142, which is higher than my rating right now. My over-the-board chess rating right now is 2072. So I was having a really great chess year, and actually in this year, I played over 100 over-the-board chess games. I mean, 100 classical games. Like, that's so much time that I spent playing chess that year. I was in middle school, and I was traveling all around the world playing chess games. I even played more games that year than what my mother did, and she's a grandmaster. It was insane. But this was during a time where I really wanted to get more serious with chess. I really wanted to improve, and I actually had goals of becoming an IM, even a GM perhaps. I really wanted to get more rating and higher titles. So chess competition really mattered to me at this point in time. Here we have a picture of how I looked back then. I was still drinking the same amount of coffee as I do today, but yeah, I looked a little bit different. I'm 20 years old now, so this was 4 years ago. Anyway, so this was round number 2, and I was playing against this really strong Spanish IM. His name, Renier Castellanos Rodriguez. He was rated 2498 at the time, and I, to be honest, was not expecting to, win or do anything like that this game. But I was really hungry, I remember. And when I say hungry, I mean hungry for winning. And I prepared a lot that day, and I went to the game, feeling like I'm going to show you what I got. And yeah, I'm going to be showing you guys the game. So I started out with the move d4, and Renier went for knight f6, c4, e6, and then knight c3, bishop b4. This is now a Nimzo-Indian defense. Now, the Nimzo-Indian is a very popular opening for black. The idea is that you get your pieces out very quickly as black. There's very rapid development, and there's plenty of different ways that you can challenge white's center. So you can go c5, you can go d5, you can, castle, and then later on choose what you're gonna do. You can do a bunch of different moves in this position, and as white too, like you can do a bunch of different things here. There's many moves. My favorite move in this position is to go queen c2. Now, the idea of queen c2 is that when black goes bishop b4, black wants to exchange their bishop for this knight and destroy white's pawn structure. For instance, if you go e3 here as white, it's very common for black to capture on c3 so that after pawn captures c3, white has a really bad pawn structure, as you can see, these double pawns. So this is one of the main ideas of playing the Nimzo-Indian. But when I go queen c2, the idea is that if bishop captures on c3, I can capture back with the queen, and then I'm not going to have a destroyed pawn structure. And black will just simply be giving up their bishop pair, which, typically you want to keep your bishop pair, but in some occasions it can be good to take here if you can get a nice knight on e4. But in this position, some of the main moves are to go d5, like I said, c5 or castles, but my opponent actually went for the move d6. Now, this is not one of the most common moves, but this move has been played at high-level chess. I mean, there's many super GMs that have played this move. It's just not as common as other responses because it's a little bit slower. The idea of this move is to go e5. This is what black wants to do. If black is able to go e5, then black will get a pretty nice center a lot of times. But it's also very flexible, saying that I haven't chosen if I'm going to go e5 or c5. So I'm just going to see a little bit what you're doing, and, we'll take it from there. So in this position, the most common move is to go knight f3, simply to prevent e5. And here black went for knight d7, which is also very common, developing a knight and also threatening to go e5 now. Now, the reason why this is also not so popular to play as black is because here I can very quickly as white get a lot of center. I can very, very, very quickly, go e4 and get a bunch of space. So before I go e4, which is my plan in this position, I went bishop d2, and this is, one of the most common moves in this position, because my plan is to recapture over here with the bishop. If I would have gone e4 immediately, then black might be able to take on c3, and now I cannot capture back with the piece, because then my pawn on e4 is hanging. I would have to take back with the pawn, and then I would have this pawn structure, which I didn't really want to have. So in this position, e4, like I said, is one of the most important squares, and that's why b6 is a continuation that a lot of people take, and this was the move that Renier played, because he wants to go bishop b7 and place this bishop over here to put some pressure on e4. Now, in this position, it's important that I go e4 immediately, so that he doesn't have time to take control of this square, so that whenever he attacks here, I can go bishop d3 and defend the pawn. Now, in this position, e5 was played. A lot of people also go bishop b7 here. This is another common move, and then bishop d3, but at some point, e5 will be played. So, I mean, a lot of these positions kind of transpose into each other. So here, he went e5, and now he's immediately threatening my center. I mean, now finally he's done his breakthrough in the center. He's been able to move his pawns the way he wants. This is, how black wants to play this, either with e5 or with c5. So in this position, the most common move, and this is the move that I did, is to go a3. If I would capture on e5, I can do it, but then after something like d takes e5, after a3, he doesn't, black doesn't have to take on c3. Black can simply retreat with his bishop, and I will not even get the bishop pair. And in this position, I think that this is very equal between white and black. So if black is going to be able to challenge my center, what I want to do is that I want to get some sort of advantage. And in this position, it is to get the bishop pair. Now, the bishop pair is typically in chess said to be very strong because the bishops complement each other. In open positions, if you have your pair of bishops, light squares and dark squares can be dominated by the bishops. So they can work really, really, really well together. So that is why, a lot of times in chess, you say that having a bishop pair is almost worth 6.5 points instead of 6 points. Okay, because each bishop is worth 3 points in chess, so you would think that 2 bishops are worth 6, 3 plus 3 is 6, but no, the bishop pair can sometimes be worth 6.5 points, that half point being how good those bishops work together. So after e5, a3 was the move that I played, and I'm not gonna lie, guys, I didn't know this theory. These moves, I knew that I have looked at, this position, a little bit before the game, because I think that I had seen him play this, a couple times, but I actually hadn't really, looked at this in depth. So I actually spent a lot of time in the opening calculating all these moves, and I'm really happy that I found many of the moves that were good, because this apparently, this is theory, this is the way you're supposed to play this, but I was really, I had no idea about what the theory was here. So I spent a lot of time in the opening, and I think that the reason why Renier decided to go for this was because I was a 16-year-old with 2100. He was, an international master. I think that a little part of him wanted to play something that was non-theoretical because he wanted me to have to think by myself. A lot of times when I've played chess tournaments, a lot of stronger players have been really scared of playing like really theoretical lines because they will think that my parents, because both of them are grandmasters, have prepared me into this really deeply theoretical line, which is typically not the case. I actually am typically really happy when my opponents don't play theory because I'm actually pretty bad at theory. But I think that in his mind, he thought, okay, I'm playing as the 16-year-old. She's the daughter of 2 chess grandmasters. The only way she can beat me is if she knows some trick in the opening that I don't. So I'm not going to play a theoretical line. I'm going to surprise her. And I'm just going to play a sort of slow thing to let her think by herself. So anyways, I was happy about that though. But a3, and now this bishop cannot go anywhere. I mean, you cannot retreat to c5. And if you go bishop a5, then there is b4, and then the bishop is trapped. So in this position, the only move is to take on c3. I mean, you can also take on d4, but this doesn't really make any difference. And actually, this would be a really bad move because in some situations, there is knight c6 and this queen is trapped. So you need to take on c3. Bishop takes c3, bishop takes c3, and now queen e7 was played. He's still delaying bishop b7 because, I mean, he can do this move at any point, but he's going queen e7, attacking right now this pawn on e4 indirectly. If I, for instance, would do a move like bishop e2, then he would be able to go pawn takes d4 and then capture my pawn on e4. So this is an indirect attack on my e4 pawn. Now, in this position, I did a move that I don't think has been played before. Like I said, I didn't know the theory here. I was just playing the way that I wanted to play. And in this position, I was really trying to play moves out of my intuition. So I did a move that is not terrible. The engine doesn't like it so much. Here, the most standard way of playing is to go something like bishop d3, and then, you know, after castles, to go castles, and then after a5, maybe go b4, try to get some queenside space, just basically playing a nice and comfortable position where I have a lot of space, and I'm basically just saying, hey, your pieces, black, your pieces are pretty cramped. I have a lot more space, and I'm gonna try to push my pawns and try to improve my pieces, etc., etc. So, you know, a line could go something like this. You can see I have a lot of space here, and I definitely think that white is better in this position, but I didn't want to do this. And after queen e7, I actually went for long castles. Now, this move is definitely not terrible. I mean, white still has a slight advantage, but it's very aggressive. It's very aggressive, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to play a very aggressive game. I, in general, am a very aggressive chess player, and I love playing aggressively. That's where I feel like I play my best chess. And so I just wanted to go for this move. So here I will be giving black counter chances because my pawn is on a3. Actually, this is a weakness for me because it's going to be easier for black to break through my pawns here. There's definitely going to be plans of black trying to open up these files and attacking my king. But I thought that on the other hand, I will have plans over here too. And this bishop is right now sniping down towards g7. So I already had ideas of trying to break the center through and then trying to activate my pieces. After long castles, I am also indirectly defending this e4 pawn, because now if pawn takes d4, knight takes d4, then after knight takes e4, I can go rook e1, and right now I am threatening the knight, and the knight is actually pinned, because if the knight moves, then the queen is going to be hanging. So now if black tries to defend it, I will be able to go f3, forcing the knight to move, and then I'll be able to take the queen. So here, actually, I'm just winning a piece. Probably black has to castle, and then I'll be able to capture the knight. So with long castles, I am indirectly defending my e4 pawn. Same thing here. If you capture the pawn with the queen, there is rook e1, and I'm winning the queen. So he didn't capture the pawn, he went castles. And now that the king has castle, the king is not on e8 anymore, and then there's not these pins. And now I need to defend the pawn. So I went bishop d3 to defend the pawn, also developing a piece at the same time. Now, in this position, black doesn't really want to take on d4 with this pawn, because after knight takes, there's going to be a lot of squares that are going to be very, very weak. A lot of light squares that are going to be very weak. So black doesn't really want to allow that. So black still wants to break the center though, because still I have a lot of space in the center and it's kind of hard for black to get his pieces out. So he went c5. Another idea with c5 is that for black, it's a dream to open up this c file, as my queen and the king are both on this file. So after c5, I had to make a choice, as my pawn on d4 is right now under attack. And so I had to choose to either take on e5 or to go d5. I don't want to take on c5, because then after knight takes, I will be, taking away his pawn from the c file. It's going to be easier for him to get his rooks in. And this knight on c5 is going to be beautiful placed over here, both threatening my bishop and looking towards that pawn. So I didn't want to do that. So d5 was the move that I opted out to go for. I could have gone d takes e5, but the reason I didn't want to do that was because I felt that after a position like this, I knew that my plan was to go f4 at some point to activate this bishop, and I didn't like the fact that this pawn was going to become such a weakness in those sort of positions. As we can see right now, if I would go f4, let me just show you really quickly. If I would go f4 in this position, let's say that black would take it. Maybe right now it's not good because I can go e5, but in general, let's just go ahead and show you this. I just want to show you that this pawn will become an isolated pawn, because there is no pawn that can defend it. And even though in this position that might be okay, in general, I just didn't like the idea of it. So I also wanted to limit the mobility of this bishop. And so I thought that going d5 would, for me, close down the center, would limit the mobility of this bishop, and would basically make this pawn a little bit safer. Another thing is that a lot of times when you're attacking on one side, then what your opponent wants to do is that they want to attack on another side, right? So I wanted to attack on the king side. That for me was very clear, but I didn't really want him to be able to attack on the center then. I wanted this to become a sort of king versus queen side attack, because I believe that he didn't have that much attack on the queen side. So here he went a6, and the idea is very clear. He's going to go b5 quickly, sacrifice a pawn, and open up the files for his rooks to be able to attack my king. Note that he has still not developed this bishop. He still wants to say, you know what, I'm going to see what the best square for this bishop is, because actually going bishop b7 wouldn't really do anything, as the bishop is simply blocked by a chain of pawns. So a6, and I knew that the idea was to go b5, and I knew that I wanted to place this knight on d2 to defend these squares, and also to be able to go f4, which, like I said many times, has been my idea now for quite a while. Now, the reason I want to go f4 is because I want to open up for this bishop. And I want to try to break the center, kind of, and open up some files as well in front of his king. So I think in this position, the best move would have been to go knight d2 immediately. But I sort of wasted a tempo by going queen e2. Now, queen e2 is not a terrible move, but it basically doesn't do that much. The idea for me was that I wanted to go knight d2, and I didn't want my queen to be stuck on c2. I wanted to get my queen out to the other side to get it closer to the king. But I realized quickly that it wasn't going to be as easy as in my brain I thought it was going to be. And so actually I should have tried to be a little bit faster with my moves. But he went b5 here, and here I captured the pawn. I didn't want to allow b4. I felt like this was really scary. So I captured, and after captures, I captured back. And then here he went knight b6. Now, the idea of going knight b6 is to go at some point knight a4 and place a knight over here to be able to attack this bishop and also put some pressure on b2. I mean, right now, the dream position of black is to get both rooks involved here and then kind of move around his knights and really attack my king. So actually, right now, I realize that his attack is faster than I thought, and I realize that I have all these plans, but it's going to take me a long time to execute them. So here I went knight d2, and here he actually went bishop d7. Now this is a move that I remember that I hadn't seen during the game, but it's a really nice move because this bishop is right now a pretty good defender. This bishop is right now stopping the knight from getting to a4. Here I would capture it. So here we can see how good it was that he did not go bishop b7 and lose a tempo with that. He went immediately bishop d7. So this was a move that I remember that I had missed, and I realized that I cannot go back here. I cannot really go back here because then c4 it might come, and black has the plans of going c4 to be able to defend this square over here and maybe this one. It's very common to try to push this pawn and then try to get a knight on c5 and, you know, do something like this because the knight becomes really, really strong. And this is also especially common when black is playing towards a queenside castle. So I came to a realization that after bishop d7, I need to capture the bishop. I don't have anywhere to go, and I didn't want to allow him to take and capture back because then he might be able to bring another rook in and my queen would be very vulnerable there. So I captured the bishop, and here he did a move that I was actually quite surprised about him doing, which was that he captured back with the queen. Now, the engine likes this move. The engine likes this move. But I remember him telling me after the game, he was like, man, I wish I would have gone knight fd7. I wish I would have captured the bishop with the knight. And I was really scared that he was going to capture the bishop with the knight as well. Because, like I said before, his plan is to go knight a4 and then bring another knight over here and then basically attack with both knights my king side. So let me just show you. If it would have gone knight takes d7, then, I mean, I don't want to go f4 right now. It doesn't really make any sense because the knight is not here anymore. And he's going to be able to block it with knight e5 at some point. So it doesn't make sense to go f4. So let's say that I go something like g3 to prepare f4. Then there is going to be knight a4. And right now there is a threat of knight takes c3. I don't want to allow him to take this and, you know, me taking back with the pawn because then these pawns are going to become very weak. So then maybe I would have to do something like queen e3. But then knight db6 comes in this position. And then, I mean, it's really hard. My bishop is stuck right now here. The knight is stopping the bishop from going back. So, I mean, maybe here I have to go something like knight b1, but that just looks terrible. And if I go for my move f4, I mean, then stuff like this might come, which is really, really, really scary. Maybe c4 first, and then plans like knight a4, knight c5, knight b3, or knight d3 might become really scary. And right now, this knight is really terrible on d2. It's not really doing anything. And this knight is much better than this knight. His minor pieces and also his rooks, I mean, everything is just working together. And I really need my bishop to create any sort of attack on the king side. So I was really scared of him taking with the knight on d7. I mean, if knight takes, maybe my best move is to go king b1. And then after something like knight a4, rook c1. But this is still really, really, really scary, I think. Knight b6 might come, maybe rook b8 first, knight b6. And there's actually some really nice ideas of, I'm just going to show you, of like rerouting the knight through a7 and b5. And I just find this beautiful because in chess, we're constantly trying to find the best squares for our pieces. And I just find this idea of going knight c8, knight a7, knight b5 very beautiful. And truth is that my bishop is stuck here, and if my bishop ever moves from c3, then this b2 square is going to be really weak. So yeah, I really was really scared of that. But when he took with the queen, it was like a super big relief because I just thought, okay, now this knight is stuck on f6. The knight, it's going to take a while for him to get here. And the queen, I mean, where's the queen going? I remember thinking. So in this position, I went f4. Now, f4 is objectively probably not the best move. Objectively, perhaps h4, g4, and creating a sort of attack like this would have been the best. f4 is objectively not the best move. But I thought practically that it might be good because I am, like I said, I'm going to now be challenging the center immediately. So in this position, he went knight a4, and he's threatening right now my bishop. Now, my bishop can't move anywhere, and like I say, I don't want to take back with my b pawn because then my pawns are going to be very, very weak. So in this position, I went queen f3 to be able to capture back with the queen. Now, this becomes different than before because I realized that now that the knight is still stuck on f6, I might sometimes be able to put a rook on f1, and I might sometimes even be able to sacrifice the rook for the knight on f6. And so there's actually still, like, even without my bishop in this position, there still might be some chances of attacking. So in this position, I think he made a mistake. He went for knight takes c3. Now, I think his best move, or at least a better move than this, would have been to go knight g4. And this move looks a little bit crazy, but I remember actually being really scared of this move because in this position, the plan is that he's threatening to take on the bishop. And if I take back with the queen, then there is knight f2, and there is a fork on these two rooks. So, and the thing is that if I, for instance, would go something like rook h f1, then same thing, this pawn is going to be hanging. So maybe what I need to do in this position would be to go like rook d f1. But even then, like after takes and queen takes, there's positions where you can take and then place this knight on e5. And I think the knight will become really, really strong here on e5. So I was actually pretty scared of him going knight g4, as I cannot really move with my bishop anywhere, and he just has so many threats. So, but he went knight takes c3, and a lot of times what we say is that when you're attacking, you don't really want to exchange too many pieces because you're going to be exchanging a lot of attackers. And so when he captured on c3, I actually felt a relief because this knight was really scary on a4, looking towards my king, and so I was really happy that he exchanged this attacker for my bishop on c3, which even though in the long term might be a good piece, right now is just a defender. So queen takes c3, and here he took on f4. Now, this was the plan for him when he captured on c3. It was because he wanted to take on f4. And now my plan was simply to place a rook on f1 to then capture back the pawn. Here, maybe I should have taken this rook to f1 because my rook on h is not really doing a lot, but it doesn't really matter that much what rook I take. So rook d f1. And now he went queen a4. Once again, I feel like a knight on a4 would be so much scarier than a queen. And in this position, he's threatening the pawn on e4. Now, I don't really want to take on f4 here because then he can actually simply go knight takes d5, and I cannot capture back because then my rook is hanging. So, and there is a fork, so I actually lose material. So I don't want to take this pawn, and I need to defend this pawn. So what I did here was that I went queen c4 because I realized that if we exchanged queens, I actually thought I was going to be better in the endgame. Now, he still thought that, he was attacking, so he didn't want to exchange queens because he also realized that I was going to be better in the endgame. So he didn't exchange, he went queen a5, but I'm just going to show you what happens if he exchanges. After queen takes c4 and knight takes c4, it seems like I'm just losing this pawn on e4, but the idea is that I can actually capture on f4. I'm threatening the knight, and if the knight moves back, for instance, to f6, then I can simply capture on d6, and if he captures over here, then I can just move my rook somewhere else, and I'm gonna be here. It's equal material, but this pawn is very, very weak. This knight is, has lots of really nice places, and I have a passed pawn and a passed pawn, which is actually a really good passed pawn to have because in all king endgames, I will be winning, as this pawn is the pawn that's furthest away from the king. So it's going to take a long time for the king to defend the promotion of this pawn. So that is why I am better in this endgame. And also, if I'm able to capture this pawn, which is a very weak pawn, I will have two passers. Two pass pawns that are connected as well. So they will be able to help each other out and, you know, go and move and push. So I knew that I would be better in a position like this. And also here, if you, for instance, would defend, then I will just simply be able to bring the second rook. And after something like this exchanging, I will simply be able to go rook f3. This pawn will forever be a weakness, and you know, this knight cannot stay here forever. And if the king ever gets up here, I will have plenty of checks. So I'm better in this endgame. I'm slightly better, but unless I really mess up, I can't lose, which I figured that not losing against an international master was pretty great. So I decided that this was good. So he went queen a5 here. And now I was able to take the pawn on f4. And here my plan was to, now that my rook is over here, I can actually start attacking the king a bit more, I thought. So here he went rook b8. And the threat right now is to go rook takes b2, and after king takes b2, to go queen takes a3, or even taking on d2. But I think queen takes a3, I mean, it's very, very, very scary. But maybe it's even just better to take on d2 first, as, yeah, the rook is also hanging, of course. So, yeah, so that is the threat right now. So I need to stop this. So queen c2, I went just to defend everywhere, but especially defend from rook takes b2. If he captures, I can take with the queen. So here he did, I would say, his first like really big mistake. In this position, he should probably just move his knight around and then try to place a knight on a4 again, which is the place where the knight wants to be. But in this position, he went c4. And I think thinking that I couldn't capture the pawn. Now, c4 is the sort of move that, like, a lot of times, like, you don't want to capture this pawn because the rook on c8 is going to be really strong when you have a knight, a queen, and a king in the same file. Like, it feels like, you know, it's really easy for me to lose some material, but I actually realized that I thought that I could capture the pawn. Now, actually, in this position, I can capture the pawn immediately. I was a bit scared of queen a6. And then king b1, I was a little bit scared of a position like this. Now my knight is pinned. I need to defend it. Here I'm actually just better, but I thought that this was actually quite scary because he has threats of doing things like this. And I wasn't entirely sure of where to go with my queen, as wherever I go to defend this piece, my queen is going to be pinned. So I miscalculated though, this is the best move, but I went rook f3 because I wanted to capture this pawn and then be able to defend the knight with my rook on f3. So now my rook is actually coming pretty useful over here. And after rook f3, he went for knight d7, just simply to place a knight on e5 or on b6 or on c5. There's plenty of places that you can now go to. Like I said before, having a pawn on c4 and a knight right behind it is like one of the dream positions because this pawn can become really strong. But here I realized that I could just capture the pawn, so I did. And after this, he has to move the queen. He went queen a6 and I went rook c3. Now I felt pretty safe with my rook, my queen, and my knight all defending my king. Here he went for knight c5, and this is actually another mistake he did. Probably here he should just have gone rook a7, but here I am already better because I got this extra pawn. So here he went knight c5, and I actually didn't realize why this was such a bad move. This move actually like loses for black. Because in this position, I can go for knight takes d6. The idea is that if queen takes d6, there is rook takes c5. But I didn't realize this because I actually thought in this position, I thought if I take on d6 and he takes back and I take over here, for some reason, and this has happened to me a lot of times in tournaments, I thought for some reason he had rook takes b2. And here, if capture with the queen, then there is queen takes c5, and, you know, all my pawns are going to fall. And I thought that if king takes b2, there was queen takes a3 check, king b1, queen a1 checkmate. I didn't realize that my rook is blocking queen takes a3 from happening. And this actually happens to me, I feel like once every like over the board game. Let me know in the comments if it happens to you too. But I realized that I realized later on that I actually could just take this. So this was a really big miscalculation for me. And I mean, if I would have taken on d6, then that would have been like game over basically. Because I would just have so many extra pawns, and I mean, he doesn't really have any attack. So here I went e5 instead. My plan was that I wanted to threaten this pawn. Now I felt like I was threatening it. And if he took, I thought that I could go knight takes, and then this file would forever be safe because I could block with a knight on c6. Now in this position, his best move was to go knight a4 to threaten my rook and to put some extra pressure on b2. And just leave it the way it is, but this is a very complicated position. So here he went pawn takes e5, which I was happy about because I wanted to bring my knight out. So knight takes e5, and now he went knight a4. In this position, my best move is to go rook b3 because rook c8 is never possible as I can go knight c6, and now my knight is super strong. I am 2 pawns up. This pawn is really strong. And actually, like, my king is pretty safe here. I have so many pieces around my king. But in this position, he actually had quite a lot of time. I think he had around 10 minutes. And here I had a couple minutes left on the clock. And he went for a really, well, in this position, sorry, knight a4. He's threatening my rook. Rook h3. In this position, he went for a really crazy move. A really crazy move. Here, he has to stop me from entering on h7. He has to go h6 or h5 maybe even, but h6 is a really, you know, safe move just to stop me from getting in here, and then I will have to go rook b3, and then we will just get the position that there was before. Basically, it's going to transpose. But here he went for rook takes b2, and this is a huge blunder because I think he missed the continuation here. But I have a really beautiful continuation. Actually, I have a couple, but I think I went for one that's really beautiful. So rook takes b2. He's threatening my queen, and obviously now, like, if I'm not careful, I am getting checkmated. Like, all these pieces are coming in. So I need to be super careful here. But I have this move, queen takes h7 check. So the only move is to go king f8. And actually here, I mean, I have several moves that are all like really good. Maybe the simplest is to go queen h8. But actually, I wasn't sure what was happening after king e7. There is some checks, and okay, like, this is really good. But I had like a minute left on the clock here, and I found this move, and I just wanted it to work because I thought that this was actually the simplest way of winning in this position. Now, feel free to take right now, you know, a minute or two to find what the best move is. Or I mean, like I said, queen h8 is probably the best move engine-wise, but feel free to try to figure out what the other move that I did was. Pause the video and figure it out. But yeah, I'm gonna tell you now. It's a very forcing move. So I mean, I just thought it was really simple when I found it. But I made this move with 5 seconds on the clock, so I was terrified. I was shaking at this point because I realized I had a winning position against an international master, and I was shaking. And there were all these people around the chessboard, and the move that I did was knight g6 check. I am giving up a knight, and black can capture it with both the pawn and the queen. Black can capture it with 2 different pieces. But the idea here is that if queen takes g6, then I will simply exchange queens. I will be able to check, and after the king moves, I'll be capturing the rook. And I will be right now an exchange up, but not only that, I will win I will be a whole rook up because right now I am threatening this knight, And there's no way for the rook to defend it, as the pawn right here is stopping the rook from defending it. So the knight has to move, or the rook has to move, but then I will be able to either capture the knight or the rook. So I will be so much material up that it will be a really easy win. So he cannot capture with the queen. If he goes king e8, for instance, in this move, then I just have simply queen g8 check. And I mean, after this, it's going to be a checkmate. I will not show you the whole checkmate. It's a checkmate in 8 moves. If it's a checkmate in 8 moves, if king d6, but if he goes here, then I have rook h8 checkmate. So I will not show you the whole line, but he captured on g6, and now rook f3 check. I brought this rook into check. The pretty much, I mean, he went king e7. If he goes king e8, everything is going to be the same. I'll just check and then they'll be the same thing. So king e7, queen takes g7. If he goes, you know, either to e8 or d8, there is a checkmate. So he went to d6, king d6, and here he resigned. And the reason why he resigned is because after I go rook f6 check, I will be able to win the queen. I mean, the queen will be falling, and after takes and takes this, I mean, engine wise, it's plus 67. It's going to be a checkmate, and I mean, if not, I am a lot of material up as well. But this will be a checkmate. Like I said, this is plus 67 for the engine, so you can analyze this yourself if you want. But yeah, he resigned. He resigned after king d6, and when he resigned, there were all these people around. He actually smiled. He gave me the biggest smile and resigned. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that I had beaten this almost 2,500 chess player. Like I said, I was 16 years old. And this was, I mean, this was just such an amazing moment for me. And I was just so happy. And yeah, it was just huge. It was really huge. This is the strongest player that I've ever beaten in a classical chess game. And it was a really like important moment for me. So yeah, I just remember how happy I was. I was shaking the whole time. But anyways, guys, the rest of the tournament actually ended up not going so well for me. I mean, I think I ended up like losing a couple points of rating, but it was at that point, like during that time of the year, that I reached my highest peak in chess, which is 2175. So it was during that time that I reached that. So yeah, this was definitely a good time in my, you know, chess career. Then 1 year later, 2019 was the last year that I played competitively. And then since 2020, since the pandemic, I started streaming, etc. I haven't really played that much competitively, but let me know, guys, if you want to see more tournament analysis. I went really in depth in this game, but I just wanted to really show you this game in depth. I could definitely show you more tournament games that I've gone through, you know, a little bit shorter, less in depth. But let me know, guys, if you enjoy this, and leave me a comment down below about, you know, what you thought about the game. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Like and subscribe if you like this more instructional content that I've been doing. And I will see you all in the next video. Have a wonderful day. Whee!